technology arena. From a Thriver threat perspective, what are some of the greatest challenges in shipping, and in particular, how does the prospect of autonomous operations in shipping affect the exposure, and is there a path to security in this respect?
Yeah, I first want to start, and I want to just like simplify the thought. The difference between autonomy and then we move to AI, right? Because again, those also get tossed in between. AI is simply the process of making predictions, right? Like, let's just start there. It's making predictions. And to do that, you have to have a set of training data. So you have data that then informs an algorithm, which then makes a decision, right? And that's what an AI loop looks like. Which, if you think about that, that's much different than tracking autonomous scripted, thank you, vessels or other forms of autonomous activity that is just going in a designated path or barrier location. So when you hear our favorite Tony Stark, Elon Musk say we shouldn't have things like AI or we need to slow it down, I always like to come back to the fact that it's just making predictions. And so if we think about that and then we think about what threats might be associated with that, the threat comes if that training data that you were making the prediction on can be corrupted, because then you're training an algorithm to go off of something that does not have a designated output. Or if the computer system that the algorithm operates on is corrupted, right? Because then the algorithm could be altered or changed. But if you bring it back
by manipulation, maybe.
By some sort of input. I mean, you could even corrupt it through a variety of different ways, right? Like because it's computer code, right? It's just computer code, right? I just like to bring that back. It's still ones and zeros. And so if you think about it that way, and then you say, okay, now what do we need to do, right? So we need to secure training data. So let's say a port is looking at using AI in their container operations, or a Navy vessel or a Coast Guard vessel is using it to, they want to detect contacts at sea as they go about, right? And use visual inputs or something like that. They have to make sure that training data doesn't get corrupted throughout the process, and then that the algorithm is isolated in a way that it won't be corrupted. Then after that, you put guardrails on, so the decisions being made over time as you input, hey, query this, all right, I'm putting in A, I want a decision point out, put in B, I want a decision point out. If the AI model starts to drift, it's called drifting when it moves one direction or another, and if it goes far out of bounds, so it says, hey, I'm looking at this image, it's a cat, it's a cat, it's a cat, oh, now it's a dog, right? Or an elephant, or whatever. You put guardrails on the decision-making process. So then as the algorithm makes decisions, if it starts drifting and starts saying that cats are dogs, you retrain the data on the training model, which is why it's so important to have that data. Then you retrain the algorithm on the training data, and then you go back to cats are cats and dogs are dogs. And so when you think about it from the threats there, it doesn't sound that complicated, right? And I always like to bring it back to that point when we think about the future and how we need to isolate it. And so then the other thought about AI is people say, oh, well, the threat is it's going to displace all our jobs. It's going to take over different industries. And I back that one up. I say, well, did computers eliminate jobs? I'm pretty sure there's more people working than there was before, right? So it's not going to, and nor does AI make highly unskilled people amazingly skilled. What it does is it actually levels the playing field. So exceptional people are still exceptional, but the middle now are all at a much higher level. They're not exceptional still, but they're just below it. And that's what really happens as AI gets in the workplace. It makes incremental improvements to every process that ultimately leads to a greater change. And in this case, we're talking about change for good, right?
Right, thank you for that. Abhi, I'm going to shift it a little bit right now. We're going to come back to cyber in a little while. Abhi, as we all know, the industry needs to take measures to decarbonize, and they touched on that a little bit earlier in a previous panel. We need to play a role in the energy transition, and I know your special focus is on ammonia, and not only in shipping, but how are you approaching that with respect to shipping, and can you tell us a little bit about the pros and cons and the safety challenges in that respect?
Sorry, good afternoon, everyone.
Mike Murphy? Sorry.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. To start with your question, at Abhimanyu, we are really looking forward to ammonia being the next alternative fuel. This has been an established fact that it is going to be a portfolio of fuels. There is no one solution for the maritime industry when it comes to decarbonization or next gen fuel technology adoption to reach that net zero target, which for now is 2050. But I mean, it is still to be seen that whether it is attainable or not. But coming back to ammonia, so ammonia percentage or contribution to that goal would be close to 45%, if not more. So what we are looking at is it is going to be somewhere between, let's say, 30 to 45 or even 50, but that is all depending upon how the industry players are meeting the regulations, pushing the supply chain, or investing in the ammonia infrastructure. So at Abhimanyu, what we are looking for is ammonia is a special kind of fuel if we are looking to develop our systems. So we started off showing our technology with a small drone. It was 2.5 years back. Then we moved on to a tractor. We demoed a John Deere tractor with the ammonia cracking technology. Earlier this year, we were successful in testing a semi-truck with Abhimanyu's technology, and very soon, by the end of this year or early next year, we'll be testing the world's first ammonia-powered tugboat in the state of New York, and we are pretty excited about it. To talk about ammonia more, I would say that the major pro of using ammonia is its energy density. It is more energy dense than methanol or let's say even hydrogen, because it acquires less volume for the same amount of energy. So that is the main pro of using ammonia as a fuel. Along with that, ammonia has been around for more than 100 years. We have industry regulations around use of ammonia. We know the safety standards of handling it on a large scale. So much so we have around 220 million tons of ammonia being produced annually right now, and it is going to go up from here because the maritime industry is going to be the major demand for ammonia. And so counting on the pros, the energy density, the supply chain, the safety standards are already there, and the main advantage is it's emission free. So when you use ammonia as a fuel, the byproduct is really nitrogen and water in the form of vapor, which is already present in the atmosphere. So you're not emitting anything at the point of use. But if we go back to the supply chain, where how the ammonia is produced, that is where the real game is. game is how the ammonia is being produced. So right now there are few facilities around the world for producing green ammonia, which is through renewable energy, where the whole supply chain becomes a zero emitting chain, but that is yet to be developed. That is where the con is. The con is not a lot of green ammonia is available for the industry to adopt or to start consuming. So a lot of work is being done, a lot of MOUs have been signed, a lot of production facilities are being built across the world for production of green ammonia, or let's say to start with a blue ammonia, which is produced from through an advanced technology where the emission goes much lesser than the gray ammonia which is there in the market. So that is pretty much it. At Abhimanyu, what we are trying to look at is we are trying to use ammonia in a different perspective. We are not burning the ammonia as such for producing power. We are cracking the ammonia into nitrogen and hydrogen. Hydrogen is fed into the fuel cell for the production of electricity. So there is no actual combustion, because actual combustion requires a lot of regulatory approvals with respect to mixing with the pilot fuel and things like that. So it's another advantage of using a technology like Abhimanyu, where the ammonia is being cracked through a high efficiency process. And yeah, so we are quite optimistic about adoption of ammonia and our technology going forward. So it will be interesting to see how it goes forward.
Yes, I think it definitely will be, and maybe we'll have some questions at the end as well. But remaining on the topic of fuels and going to Margaret, the fuels, remaining on the topic of fuels and energy, let's talk a little bit about regulation. In particular, the U.S. Renewable Fuel Standard Program. Can you tell us about this, and with your experience from private and public as well, how does it impact the maritime sector, and in particular the ship operator?
Thank you. Got a lot going last. I think it's important to understand that moving forward regulatory issues, and I was going to talk about the renewable fuel standards because my original prep was like, okay, let's focus on the barriers for alternative fuels in the maritime industry. And what we like to say, based on discussions I have with my good friend John Hadley, is in order to get anything on board, you have to have a viable product. And that product has to be what we call the 5 A's. And is it available? Is it accessible? Is there arbitrage? What we're seeing with LNG and methanol, there is no arbitrage. They are exclusive agreements. So in order to get these regulations set up, you have to meet these criteria. And if anyone has been following the IMO, the press for the IMO, the MEPC 80 that just wrapped up, it basically was on a 24-month pause. So what you're seeing, you have to be fuel agnostic. And you cannot say, I'm going to be pro-LNG. And I've been in this business, I was in the LNG fuels business in 2012. So I've been doing this a long time. And it was adversarial, and it cannot be adversarial relative to the regulatory aspect of it. You need to understand that there's going to be certain fuels that will work out for certain situations. Right now you're seeing this big push with methanol. Well, in my business at Transparency Fuels, heading up TC Green, we're just looking at availability and physical volume. And in that whole instance, the 5 A's are not holding up. And one of the reasons that if you want, I can send you the PowerPoint I did on the renewable fuel standard. But one of the things, it's not accessible, it's not affordable. You're not getting a blending credit for biofuels here in the United States. Renewable LNG does not qualify under the renewable fuel standard. So it's great to worry about the regulatory side, but hand in hand, you're going to see, and I think it was the gentleman from Poland that said, you're going to see a lot of localized regulation move forward. Because as much as they talked about at MEPC, this equitable transition, it's just not possible given the range of fuels and the operators that are moving forward. Like, decisions are making billions of dollars in the order book for methanol. Well, I can tell you right now, here in the United States, you're not going to see green methanol for a decade. And I will go toe-to-toe with anyone that tells you that's not true. Because it's very important to understand that almost all these ships, too, are dual fuel. So everybody in the back of their mind is saying fossil fuels could be around for a while. And the regulators understand that as well. So I guess the point with everything has to trickle down from the IMO. And this is, in the United States at least, it has to be a regulatory process. So we have to really get our ducks in a row to agree on what the fuels are going to be, and then you have to regulate them. And you have to regulate the seafarer, you have to regulate the port state. So it's very important to understand that the regulations have to go toe-to-toe with the R&D. And right now, I just get the feeling there's so many press releases about, this ship sailed on methanol. No, it really didn't. It was a mass balance. Basically, a little bit of renewable methanol was put in the tank, and the rest was gray. So that my point is, like, the regulations have to catch up, but there's so many press releases out there that
It's
are kind of shaking
here.
it.
So that's
I love it.
It's great. We're going to divert a little bit to bring Sean back into this conversation. I just wanted to ask you, I think you touched on AI, but specific to maritime, AI, cyber threats, where do you think is the greatest vulnerability in terms of risk?
That's a great question. So, I've been working on this issue for a minute. Some of you may have heard of the National Maritime Cybersecurity Plan. I was on the National Security Council. I'm a co-author of that. I've been trying to push this maritime cyber front for a while. Where I still see the biggest risk is that we don't have visibility on, we still don't have visibility on ships. We still don't have a lot of visibility in terminals. And we're at a point where we've digitized everything. You cannot argue the old adage of saying things are air-gapped. We don't see the problems there. We're not connected. So I worked at a major energy player that had one of the world's largest maritime presence. And I said, oh, well, we don't have the problem in maritime. We don't have a problem there at all. And I said, well, have we checked? And I'm finally pushing. We got to install some cybersecurity products on the vessels. And that week, they went from the lowest incidents in the company to the highest incidents in the company. And we then routinely find that systems that were not connected, people were plugging things in. So they're plugging in a USB that has a cell phone modem on it. Well, now that is on the internet, right? Because that USB modem goes right to the internet. So I still find that visibility is not there. We still don't have a way to manifest what I call cyber terrain or cyber domain awareness over our maritime domain awareness, or MDA. So, and I put it back, in a lot of ways I put it back on the Coast Guard, which, I did a career in the Coast Guard too, so, where the captain of the port has no visibility. So he's supposed to regulate, right? He's also supposed to, he or she is also supposed to protect you from any sort of terrorist attack. And they're also supposed to protect you from nation-state adversaries because they are military, right? And it is their job to defend the country. And yet, they have no visibility over an attack that might start that way. So we think of a cyber attack, and often people think, oh, it's going to make something boom, blow up, because we watch too many movies. But really what it is it would be more like an economic impact. So the first order impact is, hey, something doesn't work, much like NotPetya. If we go back, remember NotPetya shut down 16 Maersk terminals in the United States, right? What was the economic loss there? That's an economic impact. That hurts the nation, right? And we've had, when we had, Maersk, of course, claims like 400 million or something, but we all know that that's not the actual economic impact to the region of the United States, to the American consumers and businesses that didn't get their cargo information, or cargo and materials that they had ordered, their goods, right? So that's my number one, is we need a cyber overlay on the maritime domain. It's not that hard to do. We just need to think a little bit more, and there's products that do it, but bring them into the mix. My second is on precision navigation. So much stuff now works off GPS timing, which is what GPS was originally invented for, right? Or the positioning information. We are so heavily reliant on it, and it's actually it's a 5-watt signal coming down from a satellite, right? It can easily be overpowered, it can be buzzed. We saw in the Ukraine conflict a lot of that occurring. It can be done in the United States with things you can go buy at local stores, right? So that by fuzzing that signal, that's going to disrupt in a lot of ways much of the autonomous vessels, even if they're on tracked courses, right? Because they're still using, hey, am I still on the course? Am I still on the course? You're going to throw off operations in different environments that may cause great safety threats, or they may cause, may cause a large economic impact, right? You may not have a big explosion or something like the news, but that's not really what cyber causes. Cyber causes the economic damage. And that's where the real threat is to America, because we do have an adversary who has openly said that they want to displace us as the world leader, right? They've openly said it. And I don't know, growing up, I always learned. And when somebody says they want to kick your butt, that's probably the person you should pay attention to.
Thank you, Chef. It definitely means we should all have programs in place. I know we do at the American Club.
And including the government.
Yes, no, everybody in the chain.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
And we're not there on either front.
But it's also a very fast-moving arena as well. But you're right.
Yeah, if you can't see it,
Yeah,
it's
hard to keep up.
If you can't see it.
Hard to keep up. Yes. Quickly, I want to try and stay within the time that they gave us, but I do want to get through some of these. Abhi, your thoughts? What renewables? What role do you think? What further role do you think the United States is going to be playing in driving renewable fuel requirements?
We see since history of regulation in the maritime industry, the United States has always had a unique angle to the regulations or conventions. Whether you look at Abhimanyu, which came after Margaret, or the BGP by United States Coast Guard, which came to prevent the maritime organisms encroaching upon different geographies. So, with respect to the renewables or the alternate fuels, the world is looking at the same thing happening in the future. Not only with respect to the regulations, but the innovation part, which becomes a large section of the large-scale adoption of the industry. So what I would say is even European Union or the whole European region is looking towards the United States for the fuel standards, the renewable fuel standards, or the alternative fuel standards. The startups which are coming up in the region and working in the advanced technology towards the use of alternative fuel and renewable fuels is quite prevalent in the United States region. And that is where the world is looking at, instead of looking at the piece for the production or from the regulatory standpoint, the European region. So, so much so, I mean, just to go back to the fuel production, the green ammonia that is going to be produced in the Gulf of Mexico in a huge quantity in the coming years, if not the green ethanol. So we are the whole shipping fraternity, the whole maritime shipping is really looking towards United States, not only towards quality standards or performance standards of new technology but production of fuel as well, where fuel is used in bulk for use in the maritime industry, and the whole development of supply chain around the alternative fuel market, so that there could be a pumping hub in this part of the world, particularly in the US Gulf and the East Coast as well as the South. So, yeah, United States will play a very
Margaret, on that, what is the real physical volume of truly green renewable fuels? Why does it matter?
I thought about this question when I was coming in, and the physical volumes are very limited right now, just because it's all very new, and it's important to understand that physical volumes of if you're going to talk green, they don't exist. And that's a great presentation, you're selling it, but right now they do not exist. And what they're doing is, like I said, it's a mass balance. And it's very important to understand that, go back to the 5 A's. Is it affordable? Is it accessible? And you can have as much volume as you want, but if it's not accessible, like if the infrastructure is not there, if it's going to cost you 4 times, the gentleman from Poland pointed that out. If it's going to be, if it's not going to be spot, I think that's a wake-up call for quite a few of the owners that's winning all in on methanol right now, because they're seeing they're not going to be able to get that on the spot. They're going to have to do what America's doing and going straight to the producer.
Thank you, Margaret. All the points we have to think about going forward. Quickly, I know you were on time. Really quick, because I know we all wanted to touch on this. Rich, nuclear, is it an option? Is it viable? We've got like 1 minute left.
So you're asking about the nuclear option. Yes, it is. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of interest in it, of course. It's just funny, Carly mentioned this morning about maritime blindness. This might be a good case in terms of perception where they don't pay as much attention. But I mean, there are some obstacles, obviously, but the thing is, a lot of it's been done. It's not that we're working too much of this new. The only thing I would say that's new at this point is, obviously, we have to bring the regulations back in that we had at one point for the Savannah. And oh, by the way, quick sea story on the Savannah. Legend has it that the word nuclear was actually coined by the Savannah program instead of atomic, because it was originally nuclear steamship Savannah, and they found atomic steamship would be a bad acronym, so they wanted nuclear. So that was it. But that's what I heard. So yes. But anyway, that's a true story from what I've heard. But atomic nuclear power, there's trade-offs. I think probably engineering is going to be one of the biggest challenges, and I don't mean that in terms of the nuclear plants themselves. Pressurized water, we have at least 100 plants of nuclear power that are selling right now in the Navy between the Seawolf, Virginia, LA-class, the boomers, and the carriers. So but it's a very, very standardized model of pressurized water. There's a lot of modular units that are out there. They didn't go down to the smaller micro scale at this point, where you're looking at just a few megawatts. Of course, there's the ones that are gigawatt, but that's really for land plant. It's the options that we don't have the service history on, like molten salt. They exist. They don't exist on the maritime yet. We don't have the service hours. The TRL, the technical readiness level, is not really quite up there on there in terms of reliability, where we're really confident putting that on ships right now. Not to say it can't be done, but and there's pluses or minuses, of course, with nuclear power plants with pressurized water. You have very high pressure. It's maybe 850, 900 psi. They have very strong containment around them, which means leak, which is not a good thing on ships. You want to cut down leak, so that's where molten salt comes in a little better. So there's the engineering trade-offs that we're going to be seeing over the next few years. We're working on rules right now in EBS. The Coast Guard is working on this as well, and we are in collaboration with them. They just had a seminar last week, in fact, in Washington, that included the Maritime Administration, DOE, the Coast Guard, some interests around the world, Capt, which is Korean, that just had an approval in principle from us on a nuclear design. A couple of other things they're looking for, it's not just propulsion, it's also hydrogen generation, and where you use that, so it's a zero carbon way of generating hydrogen. The other one is also for sea-based power, which again has been done before. Many people may not realize the Army Corps of Engineers designed and built Sturgis. That was around the 60s. That was a nuclear power plant on a barge, and that was done, I think, for Panama. So these things have been done, they can be done again. It's a matter of cost effectiveness. The one design that I've seen, I think it was Herbert, has a design that's about 14,000 TEUs. And so they feel that's cost effective at that level to have the high capex that you have for nuclear. So, and it also gets into how many barrels of oil that you would save, and something like 500,000 barrels of oil over its time. So there are pluses and minuses in getting the regulations back into effect and cleaning up some of the engineering trade-offs that we have for what's really the best option. But yes, it's absolutely useful.
Thank you, that was very interesting. Thank you, Rich. And I think we're gonna, well, we had more, we're going to end it here because we're under pressure for time. Can I have a round of applause for these?
Thank you very much, Dorothea, Sean, Margaret, Rich, and Abhi. And as well, thank you to each of the panels and panelists, both speakers, moderators, and participants, and the audience for questions alike. I now have the distinct honor